Hello
Good.
and welcome to Behind the Screen on Thursday. I am JM. Behind the Screen is just a show where we look at gaming with a designer's eye. We look at gaming with and books and board games and role-playing games, things that inspire us how to use them at our table and make our games that much better, that much richer, that much more exciting. And so I have a special guest today, my good friend Ben, who plays on the B team on the iconic production channel for Torg. He plays in our current FET 5 game. He plays Brother Block. Ben, welcome. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's not every day that I see the Dawn Star,
That's right.
so it's another good morning.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you here. Today we're talking about Torg Eternity, and we're going to be talking about two kind of important things in Torg Eternity and maybe how we can apply them to other games that we run. The first being the Delphi Council, which is the primary unifying theme of a Torg Eternity game. Players are members of the Delphi Council, and the Delphi Council has changed a little bit from old Torg to new Torg. And we're going to talk a little about that, and then we're going to talk about clearance levels. So these are one's a story-based thing, and one is a mechanical thing that guides players and GMs in the game of Torg Eternity. So the Delphi Council is the organization that has arisen in response to the High Lord's invasions of Earth in Torg Eternity, and that is sort of where we're starting with this. So, Ben, you've played Old Torg and you've played New Torg. What is the main difference between the Delphi Council between the two?
Uh, in Old Torg, especially because it was the 90s, um, the Delphi Council was more shadowy and conspiratorial. So you had that sort of X-Files feel of, oh, I'm working for the FBI, but is the FBI good? Are they not, like, have they been infiltrated? And if anyone wants to go back and play Old Torg, I won't give it away. But in New Torg, in Torg Eternity, it was declared really early on, like, no, the Delphi Council is good. They
Yeah.
they are good. They are. We're not going to, because all of the missions are basically from the Delphi Council.
Hmm.
So all of the printed, published missions are Delphi Council missions. If your home game chooses to play it in a different way, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's really important to be a member of the Delphi Council. So were they to turn out to be evil, then year one would have been a waste. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it's one of the things the developers said is like, nope, we want you to know that they are the good guys, and you're not going to get stabbed in the back. Now, all of the safe houses are not always safe.
Right. And the only exception to this rule, I would say, as a GM, you are given a little bit more latitude with playing individual Delphi Council members as more shadowy, especially in Pan Pacifica, where the law of suspicion is always in play. Rook, thank you for the gifts as always, man. Good to see you. So, right. So the Delphi Council acts as the unified opposition, if you will, to the High Lords' invasions. The High Lords have, they overwhelm core Earth at the start, and the High Lords, or the Delphi Council, acts as the the quartermaster, the intelligence, the um, administration of the counteroffensive. Now, this is great. I love games that have a very strong sense of unity on the side of the PCs. So, right in Deadlands, you have the Twilight Legion. In Savage Rifts, you have the Tomorrow Legion. They like legions. In my Tanar game, you guys had most of my players were part of what was known as the Empress's Hands, a an organization where the Empress would pick people to act as her agents in the field. Even in Jackals, right, you have the idea that you are jackals and you start working for patrons. In RuneQuest, you have the clan ring that gives you this, hey, here is why you are working together. In Delta Green, you are members of Delta Green. So what I like about this is it gives the players a couple of great things right off the bat. It gives them a reason to be adventuring together. It gives them a clearly focused goal and mission. And it gives them support in the face of what could be an overwhelming situation, right? In a D&D game, when you're starting off as adventurers, you don't need something like that. Although as you kind of head up the levels and you move from what we're going to let's call local heroes to regional heroes, having the support of a king, a duke with his fortress, maybe some soldiers, these are things that you can look for to give a little bit more group coherency and give a narrative structure as to why the players can draw on these assets. In Torg Eternity, they have the great requisition rules where, once per act? Once per act? Yeah, you can make a requisition of the Delphi Council. And this can be as simple as if you're going to a D&D game, once per session have something, everybody gets to make a, my brain just died. What is it? It's not diplomacy anymore. Make a charisma-based proficiency roll to get something from the Delphi, or from whoever the Duke or Elminster or the Harpers, right? These are all organizations and people that exist in D20 games or in your D20 game or whatever game you are running to get aid. Maybe they really need a wand of shielding because they've heard that the wizard that they're going to try and root out from this dungeon loves magic missiles. Maybe they got that rumor from a member of the Delphi Council. 13th Age also has something like this with the icon relationships. You can cash in requisitions with the icons and their organizations that you have relationships with. So I love games that have this kind of strong narrative framework for why the PCs should be working together and the aid and the information they can get. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Oh, yeah. Push to talk T, not R. R's. My character's running into a wall now.
That's right.
R. So a couple interesting things about the Delphi Council and the way it works now is, so all of the characters don't necessarily have to know each other.
Right.
Right. So you are basically brought in for this mission. It's something that works really well in the days of playing online.
Mm-hmm.
So from back in the 90s, I think if my experience would be that all of our characters knew each other because we knew each other.
We all knew each other, right? We were playing at the same lunch table. We were playing at the same game store. We were playing in the same basement.
And so how does my elf know your wizard? There's backstory and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
That is simplified in Torg Eternity, and that does really help for when you play online with people you don't know.
Yeah, agreed.
Because that introduction, like when you go around and say, "Oh, we're on this mission. We're on the aircraft carrier, and we're strapped in. Let's talk about who we are," or whatever. That really works in Torg Eternity. Another thing with the Delphi Council is if your players achieve the goal and retrieve the super magical item,
the MacGuffin,
the MacGuffin is then turned over to the Delphi Council so that you don't now have a guy running around with the Eye of Sauron.
Right. And I just thought of another great example. If you're playing Star Wars, this is the rebellion. This is the resistance. Like you are members of this organization, or if you're members of the Empire, I guess that worked just as well. So the other thing, so that's the narrative structure, but Torg also, to reinforce almost this war story or this resistance in the face of overwhelming odds, has an additional mechanical layer that they've added to this in the clearance levels. So D&D talks a lot about its different tiers of play, how you have like 1 to 5 is like starting hero, 6 to 10 is local, then you have regional, and you kind of have your higher tier hero. And really, that's just a sort of arbitrary delineation of the levels. 13th Age uses the heroic champion and epic tier. I think more mechanically based because it says, hey, at these tiers, here's the DCs, here's the damage, here is how you build encounters based off the tiers, right? At a heroic tier in 13th Age, one monster on level is equal to one PC. At the champion tier, one monster one level above the PC is equal to one PC in the fight, and it goes up from there. Savage Worlds has, you go novice, seasoned, you rank up as you gain experience. And so Savage Worlds and Torg have this mechanical gating where you gain experience and you can spend it however you want. But once you hit a certain threshold of experience, you are now on a whole different playing field than before. And so in Torg, this is your clearance levels. And right now we've only seen alpha clearance, which is everything that is in the core book, everything that's in the year one products. I think we may be seeing a couple of new beta perks as in the later books, like Orosh, Tharcold, Pan Pacifica. But essentially, at 50 experience points, your game now goes from an alpha clearance game to a beta clearance game. And this is sort of like ranking up in the military, right? The Delphi Council has a very hierarchical structure based off UN and US, and worldwide militaries. And so at an alpha level, you have the most Storm Knights. This is the broadest pool. But at 50 experience points, the number of people who have 50 or more experience points in the possibility war, that shrinks. And the Delphi Council says, hey, you've been proven. You've survived. You have experience. You are now a beta clearance. Let's go. We'll give you more assets. We're going to put you on tougher missions. We're going to give you access to more gear and more perks that require more training and more investment. The more experience you have, the more the organization invests in you. Well, alpha, beta, gamma, and then in theory, you're right, we'll go to delta after that. I think most of the High Lords are delta level threats, if I remember correctly in the books. He said, why not just pull out one of his books and actually look at this. So we'll talk a little bit more about what's available for the beta clearance stuff. But Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about the clearance levels and your experience with them and what you like about them as a player?
So one of the things that we've discussed about Torg before is that unlike many games, your characters aren't that squishy. You're the hero. All of us, every player on the team is the hero of his own action movie.
It is a delta level threat for the High Lords. No supposition here, Rook.
Even in Alpha, you're taking out multiple bad guys, and so by the time you get to Beta, it's getting even bigger. And therefore, on the flip side, the GM gets access to things he didn't have before as well in Beta, and the threats go up significantly. It's a little bit like Orosh. If you're an alpha level character and you play the game but never go to Orosh, you probably didn't come that close to dying, or maybe you rolled bad or whatever. Like when you step into Beta, you're like, oh, I might not make it out of this. It's sort of Alpha gets your foot wet and gives your character time to build up. And then once you hit Beta, you're really embroiled in the politics of the world and achieving goals bigger than saving a guy from a demon. You know?
And there is an ebb and flow there. I like how you brought that up, because you start with, at Alpha, you start learning, and as you kind of go up, As you gain more experience, you kind of hit this crest where you can take on most alpha level threats with no issues. Then you cross that threshold, and there's a moment where it drops down because beta level threats are tougher. You've stepped into a bigger pool. But as you gain your XP, you go back up, and then the next wave crests. And yeah, so we'll put links in the show notes. There are 2 free PDFs for Torg Eternity. One is the beta clearance players primer, which shows you some new perks, kind of explains the differences, gives you a little bit more information into the workings of the Delphi Council. And then you have the same thing for the Game Masters. And one of the things that it does say is, hey, as soon as your players hit beta, you gain a pool of possibility equal to 2 possibility per every player. And it can be spent on everything, even non-reality rated foes. You can't soak if you're not reality rated, but you can still spend them to up damage, make hits better, make interaction attacks better. So what happens is there is a mechanical benefit to, and penalty, if you will. There are mechanical interactions with the system in the story that as you move up these clearance levels, things change in the way they play. In F20 games, again, 13th Age sort of kind of being the exception there because there are mechanical shifts as you go up tiers. Again, the hard and fast delineations between what should be happening in different levels is really more suggestions. Like, there's nothing that says that a DM can't just gradually increase the CR of monsters and have no real change in the game aside from the monsters get tougher in most F20 games. And I love F20 games, but that's sort of the truth. You know, they say this is narratively important, but they don't give you a ton of mechanical interactions. Again, aside from the typical things you get leveling up. I'm not trying to say that F20 games are not amazing, because I run a lot of F20 games, but I know, Rook. Apparently, the gremlins are trying to keep you from being as witty as you normally are. So I like the way that Torg structures this. You have a narrative goal, and you have a narrative support structure, but they don't just leave it as sort of hand-wavy to the GMs. The team with Torg Eternity, Greg and the rest, they've put mechanical support to what is important to the narrative story. And again, as you move up, you're going to glory more often, which means you're more likely as a beta clearance character to go to dealing with the Stela and are able to handle that. But the other thing that it does is it also allows the GM to very clearly let players know, hey, this is a beta level threat. Proceed at your own risk. Like when the group was going after trying to defend the Golden Gate, and Brother Block, you and Kit went to investigate the gate, and I was like, there are living god statues there. And she's like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, these are beta rated foes. If you go in through the front gate, know that you're going to be punching way above your weight class. And so the group came up with the way to go under and go around them. Now, the other thing is that I love about the advice in the beta player or the beta clearance GM's guide is they say don't always just up the difficulty. Sometimes it's okay in a beta rated game to throw out a ton of alpha threats and let your heroes shine as they mow through mobs of things that used to be a big threat to them. And I think that also allows us to, especially in Torg, exemplify the fact that these guys are action movie heroes. So what does that mean if we're not playing in Torg? Well, one of the things that I like to do is I think minions are a great way to replicate this in an F20 game. Right, 13th Age actually has the Mook rule, but you could import from 4th edition. You know, if your players are higher level and you want to throw a ton of orcs at them, give each orc 1 to 5 hit points, and let the players just go crazy. Make them feel like the action hero if that is the style of game you are looking for. It fits really well with Torg. The mob rules the way beta clearance works, this fits with, hey, I'm on a new tier. I'm not the guy who is threatened by a couple of goons with Uzis. Now I'm the guy who takes out the groups of goons with Uzis, but the boss is waiting, in the next room, and that's going to be the big threat.
I think also when you, not when you're designing a game to make a game, but when you're designing a campaign, when you're designing an adventure, you want all of those highs and lows, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want some funny moments, some dramatic moments, some high action moments, some near death moments, and so yeah, the one big bad, right? That's gonna be a guaranteed like difficult fight, and this is the big thing. Um, but giving your players that you know 50 skeletons to really chop
Mm-hmm.
down, that is not only just a fun night of gameplay, but it's also balancing the nights where we didn't have any combat. It was
Right.
all it was all character building and discovery,
Yeah.
and so finding the places to put that in there. For example, in Torg Eternity, uh, sometimes right after you've achieved something or discovered something, well, now I'm in a Gosfog field,
Yeah.
and they're mindless, and they can't, it's fighting a whole bunch of plant zombies really, but now tonight's adventure is just going to be mowing the plant zombies,
Mowing the lawn. Yeah.
and then we'll get back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and Rook's got a good point too. Some groups, like my Fading Sun group, loved all of the sads, and so they just. Oh, see, I love Zweihander. Oh, that game's great. Or Warhammer Fantasy, if you want a slight bit of grimsicle nature of Warhammer Fantasy that Zweihander kind of stripped out of it. Although, if you read I know there's a massive digression. I love the the class abilities because there's a lot of humor hidden in. I think the smuggler his class ability is Hans shot first. The valet has an ability called Alfred Pennyford. I think is what it is. Like there's a lot of little funny nods to the Grimsy, but yes, Zweihander was like, well, we're going to turn this up to a dark horror game as opposed to like a grimsicle dark fantasy game. So someday, Rook, we'll play some Zweihander together. Well, Ben, my cup of coffee is done. We have reached about our half-hour mark. Thank you so much for jumping on and doing this. We're going to start doing recaps in character, and Brother Block will be our first recap. So look for that on the Iconic Instagram page. We will be pushing that live at some point before Tuesday of next week. Share it around. If you like the Torg game, if you like what Iconic does, share, add to your story, do all of the things that you do on Instagram, which I am really bad at. That's why I employ a producer. So, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Always good to talk Torg Eternity with you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love it. I think my final thought would be something that Greg says all the time, which is that Storm Knights can do anything. They just can't do everything.
Yes.
And if you look in the book, the things that I don't think I want to be able to do it, but I can't do it yet, you probably can when you get to beta.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, 50 experience points is a lot of experience points. But then the next tier jumps up. I think the first tier you need 50, and then you need to get an additional 100 just to get to Gamma tier. Excuse me. So, thanks to everybody. We will be back on Tuesday where we're going to start our look at Heroic Fantasy. I don't know how long the look at Heroic Fantasy will be, but we're going to do Heroic Fantasy and Low Fantasy and High Fantasy and Epic Fantasy as kind of our first 4 looks at the genre books that inspired the games, games that you can play, what they do to reinforce that experience of that type of fantasy. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. Tune in on Saturday morning for our Exploring Glorantha show at, doing the math in my head, at 10 o'clock Central. And we will be doing our Trail of Cthulhu one shot on Sunday night. You can tune in on Twitch. That is Ben's lunar costume from the time that he played in Evan's game on our channel. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to all of our patrons who keep the lights on here at Iconic Studios. Thanks to everyone who has been following both the Torg game and the new Deadlands game, which will be back on Monday, and to everyone who shows up for Behind the Screen, either here or on YouTube. I appreciate all of you. We will see you all on Tuesday for more Behind the Screens. Have a good one.